It's my distinct honor of introducing you to Majora Carter, a leading voice in the movement for environmental justice and equitable urban development. Majora Carter has been widely recognized and honored. Her inspiring words even grace the walls of the Smithsonian Museum of African American History and Culture in DC, and they read, quote, "Nobody should have to move out of their neighborhood to live in a better one." A quote which is also the subtitle of her 2022 book, Reclaiming Your Community. Majora was born and raised and continues to live in the South Bronx, where she has firsthand experience pioneering sustainable economic development in the South Bronx and in cities across North America and beyond. After establishing Sustainable South Bronx and Green for All, among other organizations, she opened a private consulting firm which was named Best for the World by B Corp in 2014. In addition, Majora launched Startup Box, a groundbreaking tech social enterprise that provided entry-level tech jobs in South Bronx and has helped connect tech industry pioneers such as Etsy, Gust, FreshDirect, Google, and Cisco to diverse communities at all levels. As our HopeBuilder lunch continues, friends, please give a warm welcome to Majora Carter.
There's a lot of you out there. Good Lord. Thank you for having me. So I'll start with the fact that successful companies don't invest in talent so that the competition can hire them away. They keep their people motivated to grow with the company and inspire those around them to lean in with them. And I believe that talent retention, same kind that we talked about earlier today, is the same tool used to grow successful companies, can also be used to build great neighborhoods for the people born and raised in them. My hometown is the South Bronx in New York City, and it's the kind of neighborhood that one might say resembles a talent repulsion strategy. Back in the 1980s, I walked by this crack house on the way to the subway that would take me to my high school, one of the best in the country, the Bronx High School of Science. Now, neighborhoods like mine were places where inequality is assumed by those who live there and by everyone on the outside looking in. These are the places where schools and public health, air and water quality, parks and trees, food options, and career opportunities are worse than in other parts of the same town. Government-subsidized rental housing and health clinics, homeless shelters, liquor stores, dollar stores predominate, but there are few banks, but plenty of check cashing stores and pawn shops that charge you to use the money that you do have. I refer to those communities as low status. I don't use poor, low income, or underprivileged because status implies that something much larger is at work, that inequality is a well-established fact. You know, think about the communities like this near you. They are everywhere. They're inner cities, they're Native American reservations, white Rust Belt towns, you know, where industry has come and gone, and they are all over the world. And bright kids who grow up in them are expected to measure success by how far they get away from the neighborhoods they were born and raised in. I was one of those kids, and now I'm a real estate developer and strategy consultant, and I work nationally, but the South Bronx is my research and development lab, and I like for restorative community economic development. That way I can just check on all my projects really easily. But that place that was once a crack house is now my award-winning hip-hop cafe called the Boogie Down Grind. And it's, yeah. And it is 2 blocks away from the house I grew up in and around the corner from the house that I live in right now. And you know, look, my parents were actually born, or my father's parents were born into slavery. So my dad learned from them growing up, actually literally 7 miles away from that great man from Plains, Georgia, that life was generally not really fair to black folks, but they still believed in the promise of the American dream, and regardless of how that promise was often unevenly applied. I was advised to offer a trigger warning, you know, for the next image, which was taken in 1863, which shows a man who came to be known as Whipped Peter. I'm sure many of you have seen this photo. The photo is of his savagely scarred back. which helped, and that photo helped raise a national outcry against the cruelty and brutality of slavery, despite its profitability for some. Now, we know that the legacy of American slavery continues in various forms, such as economic inequality, but like the abolitionist movement that was emboldened by seeing the reality of Mr. Peter. Habitat for Humanity's great work also works boldly to address that shameful legacy head on. So the system behind who gets to participate in the American dream is rooted, in the history of our country and in capitalism, and the spirit behind its application determines many important outcomes. So listen, I'm changing the slide right now, so if you need to look away, now would be the time. So we know that our system supported this. Guess what? It also supported things like this. Black Wall Streets, those communities, right, of black folks formerly enslaved, or just one generation out, where folks built thriving businesses and wealth, and the most famous of them being the town of Greenwood in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Black Wall Streets were burned down, and the black people who were in them murdered or displaced by white mobs savagely and without consequences. Was it capitalism's fault, or was it some kind of white cultural distinction that still remains mostly unaddressed, in this country? I know that some people don't really like hearing about these things, but imagine what it feels like if you had to experience it. But the truth is, America's had talent retention strategies in place, since the 1619. Programs like these were there, and slavery provided white Americans all the benefits of its barbaric and predatory industry, and although built on the same sustainable ideas of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness and property ownership, Black Wall Street suffered consequences that we experience to this very day. Same system, very, very different outcomes. Citigroup estimates that the racial wealth gap has cost the U.S. $16 trillion in just the past 16 years alone. Now let's just think for just a moment about how that money could have made it into the economy, but didn't because of the systemic racism that defined who benefited from America's growth. No need to reinvent the wheel here, though, because if we want to make America as good as it's promised, and I believe we can, then we should apply the same tools that created white wealth in America to create wealth in low-status communities. It's really that simple, especially in terms of property ownership and real estate development. Because think, real estate development now, in low-status community just takes two different paths. One is something we call poverty maintenance, wherein you'll see the concentration of things like government-subsidized affordable rental housing, health clinics, pharmacies, and philanthropic and government dollars pour in the nonprofit industrial complex seems to view poverty almost as the authentic cultural attribute of the area, and thus you'll see all sorts of programs that are designed to manage poverty, but the things on the ground for people there really don't change. Money is being made from all this, but not for the local people, in the community. In fact, some can even view many of the most well-intentioned programs as a talent extraction process, where the most promising talent in low-status communities are led to believe that they need to grow up and take their talent and to be somebody, but take their talent somewhere else. Now, the other type of development is gentrification displacement. When urban populations grow, there's definitely politicians and some activists actively resist density or greater density. So you have rising demand, limited supply, and prices will go up. Gentrification generally means outsiders coming in to build the place to sort of suit their own needs, and not those that are ones that are on the table for the people that are in the community, although they're not always mutually exclusive. Indeed, people in low-status communities, we want nice things too, and that's why they often leave when they can in order to experience them. So capitalism can fuel gentrification and displacement or poverty maintenance, but neither of those strategies help the people already there to live in the kind of neighborhoods that we all deserve. What if we looked at low-status communities as though they were struggling companies? How could we turn them around? How would a talent retention strategy work for neighborhoods? So I have some ideas. So municipalities, they hand out corporate retention deals because they believe that the benefit of having economic activity is worth the price of that subsidy. So we'll need to do that with those in low status communities because the people there are led to believe that they should measure success by how far they get away too. But we can't force people to stay, but we can sort of nudge them in that direction with lifestyle infrastructure. Again, the type of places that our survey data told us that people are leaving to experience. Places like cafes and bars and restaurants, farmers markets, bookstores, they build positive community interactions and make people feel cool. Another nudge would be real access to property ownership and also business ownership that keeps people vested in the neighborhood. You know, that's basically what Habitat was doing. These are like the benefits or stock options. When the community does well, so do the residents, kind of like the employees of a hot startup. And so how do we make sure that those benefits and stock options, get in the right hands and appreciate and value for the folks in those communities? And again, have some ideas. So in the US, if you're accused of a crime and can't afford legal counsel, a public defender will be assigned to you. The same can be done for local property owners. Talk about keeping people where they are. Before a real estate transaction goes forward within a low status community, the seller should receive quality legal and also financial counsel, right? Yeah, I think that's everywhere. So that they're fully aware of the value of their land and how to maximize it for generational wealth potential through sensible refinancing, through things like building vertical additions and ADUs, or using the value to put their kids through school or start a business. Maybe those property owners should be classified by the Securities and Exchange Commission as a protected class to protect low status wealth from liquidation, because it is common for people who do own property in low status communities to be approached with fast cash offers by predatory speculators. These can be very enticing for a person who's never seen any kind of value expressed in their community. Now, real estate and private equity have done a very effective job of increasing wealth inequality by separating financially inexperienced people from their generational wealth potential. So and think about this, a few years ago, the SEC proposed new rules regarding businesses to report their greenhouse gas emissions in an effort to increase transparency to their investors. And maybe we should do the same daggone thing for taxpayers. We know real estate and private equity firms can engage in some really predatory practices at the expense of taxpayers by privatizing their profits and socializing the cost to us. Now, a business model that reduces opportunities for home ownership also creates more landless renters, exacerbates the concentration of poverty, and statistically increases poverty's ill effects, including higher rates of bad policing and incarceration and lower health and educational attainment. And those are just the stats. Their methods shut aspiring homeowners out of the American dream. And it comes at a cost to taxpayers. So it should come at a far greater cost for those who do business like that. And hopefully it'll make them not do it. But anyway, another issue is that some renters actually pay more in rent than they would on a mortgage. But most of us who need mortgages simply cannot compete with the speed at which predatory speculators operate. A possible solution is for philanthropic organizations to buy properties at market value from those who choose to sell and hold them so that other folks within those communities could have the time to get financing. That's a valuable cushion of time, and at least it gives people a chance, it's a low risk to the philanthropies. It's a good place to park some capital, frankly. And these are some examples of how we can use a restorative economics approach. Yeah, it is still capitalism, but it's got rules and safeguards that favor the outcomes we need as a nation. But folks on the ground are look, they're moving. For example, in West Oakland, California, third-generation West Oaklander Noni Sessions leads the East Bay Permanent Real Estate Cooperative. They have recently acquired property collectively to build permanently affordable mixed-use development that benefits resident owners. The cooperative offers lunchtime learning sessions to help folks understand how to leverage real estate, investment, and development. And their current membership includes about 500 community, investor, resident, and small business owners, and they have to date raised over $5 million for their community land and housing fund. In Philly, a community development program called Jumpstart Germantown, started by Ken Weinstein. He's a commercial real estate developer, and they provide training and loans to aspiring local residential developers, mostly women and people of color. And since 2015, more than 1,000 people have gone through the program. More than 200 loans have been deployed, totaling more than $22 million, and the rehabilitation of more than 300 units. These respective activities improve the value of each other's projects, and these folks are reducing blight as they build wealth from inside, making a difference in now more than a dozen communities around the country. And in the South Bronx, there's this little historic rail station that brought my daddy to the neighborhood. He was a Pullman porter in the neighborhood where I was born and raised. And so, but back in the 1940s, it was even harder than it is now for a black man to get a mortgage. He won $15,000 in a horse race in Los Angeles, literally carried the cash back in a satchel back across the country to New York, and purchased a home from a family, this nice Italian family who was willing to sell directly to a black man at the time. And that rail station was acquired by his baby daughter, who is transforming that into a talent retention, multi-use performance space for music, weddings, gaming tournaments, all sorts of things like that. And thanks. Yeah, and it's just like, my dad actually would have turned, on April 18th, would have been 117 years old. And I think about that, and like I am like the manifestation of my mommy and daddy's like wildest dreams for themselves. Yeah. So I'm not saying that talent retention is going to solve all the problems associated with poverty maintenance or displacement and gentrification, or right all the wrongs of capitalism, but we're not going to solve any of our challenges without talent retention. Yeah. We don't have to keep building monuments that honor the shameful practices that created the inequality that low-status communities now face. And Habitat for Humanity has shown that in spades all over this country, all over the world. If we use the tools that we actually have available now in a restorative way, people in low-status communities won't have to move out of their neighborhoods to live in better ones. Thank you.